Hello and welcome to this morning's webinar. My name is Len Bingley and I'm the editor of Construction News. Today we're going to be focusing on mentoring and its role in supporting career development, as well as the contribution mentoring schemes can make in improving business prospects. I think both aspects are important, more important than ever, in today's virus crisis. Now, obviously, because of this crisis, everyone involved in the webinar this morning is working remotely, and we're all at the mercy of our individual internet connections. So please do bear with us if we have a few technical difficulties this morning. My own broadband has a nasty habit of dropping out without any warning at all. If that happens, I shall try to reconnect as quickly as possible, but one of my colleagues may step in to fill the breach if that happens. We are scheduled to run for about 45 minutes today, and a recording will be available afterwards if you're not able to stay for the whole session. We will also be taking questions towards the end of today's session, and hopefully the means to submit them will be obvious to you on screen as you're watching. Do submit your questions as soon as they occur to you, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. Now, today's webinar is part of our Inspiring Women programme at Construction News. This is a campaign that aims to address the gender imbalance that exists in the construction sector. We hope the focus of today's discussion will be of particular relevance to the women who do work in our sector today, but I hope it will also be useful to everyone who has tuned in. I'd like to thank the sponsors of our Inspiring Women campaign. Our headline sponsor is Wilmot Dixon, and the supporting sponsors are Imtech, NASC, Trad, and Vinci Construction. Now, I'm delighted to say we have an all-female panel today. In alphabetical order, they are Barbara Carlisle, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Leader at Arcadis, Dana Walker, Director at Built by Us, Holly Harkus, Associate at Aviva Investors, and Michelle Cotterill, Operations Director at Wilmot Dixon. So I would now like to hand over to our panel to introduce themselves, starting with Barbara, please.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining. I'm Barbara Carlisle and I work with Arcadis, which is a global designing and engineering business, to improve the inclusive culture of the organisation. We work across several regions and have 27,000 staff. That means I work with the stakeholders from across the globe and work with everybody from apprentices up to our senior board members. I've got quite a lot of experience around mentoring and coaching, some great experiences, some not so great, and I look forward to sharing those with you today. I also chair the Northwest branch of the National Association of Women in Construction, so I have a connection with the local community that I am based in. I'm based in Liverpool. And I'm happy to share my insights and views with you today. Thank you.
Dana, would you like to go next?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dana Walker, and I am the director and founder of a social enterprise called Built. Before forming the social enterprise, my background is in construction. So I actually started as an electrician many moons ago, before a change of direction and training and qualifying as an architect. And in each of these roles throughout my career in construction, I haven't seen huge numbers of people who look like me or necessarily reflect my experience, and that was part of the inspiration for starting Built by Us. So what we do, we support people to develop amazing careers in construction, and particularly those from diverse backgrounds. We run mentoring programs. One of our programs, the Fluid Diversity Mentoring Program, is an award-winning program that's been running since.
Dana, I'm afraid your connection is rather poor this morning. I think all of us are having a little bit of trouble hearing you. So I'm going to ask Holly to take over and introduce herself, please. Thank you, Holly.
Hi there, so I'm Holly Harkus and I'm a real estate transactions manager at Aviva Investors. So I sit in the sort of client side of the construction world. My role sees me covering real estate investment across the whole of the UK, specifically focusing on development and retail opportunities. So this is everything from the sourcing and business planning and underwriting of proposed acquisitions all the way through to disposing of assets once maximum value has been achieved. I'm a qualified chartered surveyor, but I originally started by studying architecture at the University of Sheffield, which is also where I completed my master's and where I started to get my first experiences of mentoring, being a mentee. So I have a range of experience of mentoring in different formats, all of which have been invaluable, both informal and formal mentoring arrangements. I think there's a huge amount to be said for more informal arrangements, as this allows for a partnership between a mentor and mentee to develop more organically, though that's not to say formal mentoring doesn't have a place. I think it's really important around setting more structured career goals. I'm also particularly interested in how early career mentoring and coaching can help encourage more underrepresented groups into the industry, so from schools and universities. And so for this reason, I volunteer with the Urban Land Institute's Urban Plan initiative. So this aims to educate groups of children from low-income backgrounds on the possible professions within the construction and real estate world, which is obviously an industry they may not otherwise have exposure to. At Aviva, more specifically, as a company, we've implemented mentoring initiatives across the business, from our membership of the 30% Club for female senior leadership, all the way down to graduate and intern career mentoring and buddy systems. And I think this cross-career approach aims to benefit employees across the whole company at all different stages of their career. And we're also encouraged as employees ourselves to take part in external mentoring arrangements, both as mentors and mentees.
Thank you, Holly. And finally, Michelle, please, to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Len. Good morning, everybody. I'm Michelle Cottrell, and I work for Wilmot Dixon as an operations director. So this is, my role is responsible for several sites across the Midlands, ensuring that we're building safely. My background is actually in HR, so I've got mixed experience of the mentor program over the years, from having some really good experiences with some great mentees as a mentee and some great mentors, and also as setting up mentor programs throughout the different businesses that I've worked within. Wilmot Dixon, as the reason we're sponsoring the headline partner on this construction, Women in Construction, Inspiring Women in Construction, is we have a target of being 50-50 gender neutral across our business at all levels of our business. As an industry, we don't have enough women coming through, which means we're going to struggle to get women at the top levels of our business unless we do something to support that. And we use mentoring as a key role of part of that process to ensure that the women that join our business stay with us and progress. And that's one of the key things I focus on at the moment.
Thank you very much, Michelle. We will turn to questions from the audience later on, as I mentioned, but we're going to start with some just questions that I'll be putting to the panel. So the first question is fairly broad. We are here today as part of the Inspiring Women campaign at Construction News. That's about addressing underrepresentation within our industry. Now, mentoring is obviously something which can be helpful for everybody, no matter what their role within their career or within their industry. But in what ways do the panelists think that mentoring can help those underrepresented groups? And perhaps Barbara, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, sure. Great question. I think mentoring is for everybody, not just women and underrepresented groups. If you think that everybody has or can create their career goals, and many people want support with those career goals. So I think mentoring is something that should be accessible to everyone. Where I think it's particularly pertinent for women and other underrepresented groups is when it comes to the sort of issues-based queries and barriers that people are facing to achieving or even beginning to articulate what those goals are. So if we can support women and underrepresented groups to actually tackle those issues, and some of them may be systemic bias, some of them may be around personality or behaviours of others or themselves, so something like shyness or dealing with a not particularly supportive manager, when you see other managers being really supportive, and it's that feeling of unfairness. So I think mentoring can support in that way, albeit that it's not a counselling service, but I think if you have a goal, it's great, but it can also be used for issues, and women are more likely to have those issues than men, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks. Dana, your connection is showing is a little bit stronger now, so I don't know if you'd like to weigh in on this question about how mentoring can particularly help groups who are underrepresented.
Absolutely, and apologies for the technical issues at this end. But yes, I believe it's incredibly powerful. It can be transformational for many people who are either new to the sector or new to professionalism. I think one of the reasons that we use mentoring, and it's been so impactful, is that it helps people to build networks. It helps people to build confidence, but also for the mentors as well. It gives them a sort of almost safe space to kind of explore issues in a completely different way than they might do in the workplace. More often than not, with the programs that we run, we are matching people from different organizations, so people don't necessarily have to worry about the kind of the office politics and that kind of thing. They can share quite openly what's impacting them in terms of how diversity impacts their careers, and we've found that is a hugely positive benefit, no matter what background people are coming from.
Thank you, Dana. Holly, I think this is a topic you touched on in your introduction about how mentoring can help these underrepresented groups. What's your thoughts? And I think you're muted still at the moment.
Sorry. Yeah, so I think it's really true. I think sort of the area that I'm particularly interested in is kind of how mentoring early on can actually get people to apply into these kind of industries, just through that education of kind of what opportunities are available. But I do feel that when you're in your career, you're sort of partway through, it's so important to have, whether it be external or internal support through a mentoring relationship, to be able to have that kind of sounding board around, these are the situations I'm experiencing. Almost, are they normal? Is it okay that this is the approach people are taking towards me? Or I've had this situation, is the response from my manager or whoever it might be okay? And I think it's about being able to have that sounding board. And actually, sometimes I've had a mentor who turned around to me and went, you know what, Holly, actually, everybody has their problems, kind of, you need to sort of realise that a bit. But then on the flip side, there are times when they turn around and go, you know what, actually, that's not quite right. Let's see how we can approach this and what you can do or what we can do as a partnership to sort of move forward from this situation.
Thank you, Holly. Michelle, I think we haven't heard from you yet on this broad question about underrepresented groups.
Yeah, I think my internet may be fading, so I'm hopefully I've turned my camera off. I certainly within our industry there are not many, as Dana said at the beginning. People can look at our industry and think there's nobody there that looks like me, and that's where I think we do get people into the industry, having people with similar experiences to encourage them and just to talk things through, sometimes informally, can be really helpful. I think some of the conversations I've had over the years, it's also trying to dispel some of the myths. People can see barriers because of perceptions and reputation, etc., that actually don't exist once you're in the roles. And having people that you can talk to about that, it can be really, really helpful. So I think it's about promoting the fact that we are here to help, and that mentoring program is there to do that, but also creating those networks of people who may have similar experiences to you that you might not feel comfortable necessarily talking to your line manager about.
Thank you. There are obviously all sorts of pitfalls that can arise in mentoring. There are also many questions people may have in their minds. How do I go about finding the right mentor? How do I talk to someone about the possibility that I'd like them to mentor me? So I'm interested in exploring those sorts of issues. How do you get started? What should you watch out for? Do you need to find somebody, a mentor who's had a similar career path to you, or is it better to have a variety of viewpoints? So really, in that sort of business about getting started in a relationship, I'd be interested to know what the panel thinks about that. Holly, would you like to start? What's your advice for people in those early stages, who they should be looking for, what pitfalls they to watch out for?
It's the muting thing that I'm falling foul of at the moment. I think I think getting started, it depends on kind of whether it's an informal or formal partnership that you're looking for. I think often earlier on, the formal partnerships can be seem slightly more intangible because of the fact, unless you're going through a specific program, whereas those informal partnerships can come about from anything, whether it be meeting somebody at a careers fair, if you're in a university, or whether somebody's coming in to talk to you. Obviously, I think with the school piece, as we've discussed previously, there is a safeguarding situation that goes there, which I think as mentors you have to be very conscious of. But I think it's about just approaching people and sort of saying, it's not as simple as going, will you be my mentor? But sort of starting to develop those conversations and understanding kind of what it is that you want to get as a mentee out of the relationship. I know that kind of coming into the industry, sort of there's a lot of talk around having a mentor and all this stuff. And it's not necessarily as simple as going, well, I need to have a mentor if I'm going to succeed. It's about understanding what you as an individual want from that relationship. And then I think that will then help you find sort of the appropriate path to who would then be a successful mentor for you.
Barbara, what's your view on this this issue about how people should look for the right kind of mentor? And at your company, is there a formal scheme to help people get started?
I do like what Holly's saying, is that you have to explore the formal and the informal, and you have to make connections with people. We have several schemes running in our business. We have a couple of reverse mentoring schemes where we have people from our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender network mentoring our UK leadership team, and a couple of our partners in the business. And I believe that's going quite well at the moment. It's a relatively new concept driven through a request from our LGBT team, and also the appetite from our UK leadership team to engage in that. And then the other reverse mentoring program we've got is a global one where we have our early careers people mentoring our executive leadership team. And I was speaking to Alan Brooks, the chief executive of our Europe, Middle East and UK regions, and he was saying he's got a lot from that, from a learning perspective. So they're the formal type of mentoring programs, as well as a community-wide mentoring exchange program we've got that works well if people have the appetite to join it and read the instructions, read the codes of guidance, but it's not as dynamic, and so it's slightly more awkward. And so I think, one of the pitfalls is setting up a scheme and then not encouraging everybody to explore relationships within that program. I think a pitfall for mentoring, going back to one of the elements of your question, a real pitfall is, well, there's two pitfalls for me. One is that it doesn't guarantee a promotion, it doesn't guarantee a resolving of the issue that you might have, but it does help you get clarity around your goals and the obstacles that you might face towards your goals. And then the other thing for me is that you, as a mentor, you're not somebody's savior. You're one element of a cohort of people who can support them and act as a sounding board and give them insight, whether you're from within their organisation or not. So I think that's sort of a summary of my views there.
Yeah,
thank you.
Dana, what's your perspective? Sorry, I am conscious I asked a fairly rambling and unspecific question, which is probably a fatal mistake in these circumstances. But Dana, what's your experience about that process of getting started and the things to watch out for in the early stages of a mentoring relationship?
It's a great question, and I agree with the points that both Holly and Barbara have been raising. I think if I just add to the bit about pitfalls first of all, so one of the things that we see quite often is where expectations haven't been really set for either the mentor or the mentee. So people go into the relationship not really knowing what to expect and not necessarily communicating with their partner, because it is a partnership and what it is that they're expecting from that relationship. We run structured programs, so we actually assist with this by getting them in that initial chat to sort of talk about expectations, talk about everything from their communication style, how they prefer to be contacted, how regularly they'd like to meet or to be contacted, so we can mitigate some of that. And then the other thing is, I've heard people speak anecdotally about experiences of mentoring where there hasn't been much in the way of preparation or explanation of what mentoring is. Sometimes it can feel like it's just giving advice or directing. And this is a pretty big pitfall. The mentor shouldn't be the person directing their mentee. They're offering guidance. They're like the steering wheel, and the mentee is providing the energy, the engine, if you like. It's really about the mentee's role, the direction that they want to go, etc. The mentor is there just to provide guidance, a sounding board, and be a critical friend.
Thanks. Michelle, hopefully you can hear me. I'm not sure if you're I can see the strength of your connection here, and it's showing us fairly poor. But if you, from the Wilmot-Dixon perspective, do you have schemes? Do you have mechanisms for helping people get started in these relationships? I think you're on mute at the moment. I'm sorry, Michelle. We can't hear you at all. I can't anyway. So we'll move on to the next question.
Yes, we have different schemes.
I'm afraid, Michelle, I can't hear you. I don't know if our listeners across the web can hear you, but I think we may have to move on to the next question. Obviously, we're in the middle of a international crisis. We are facing recession. Often some of these sort of nice to have, if that's not a dismissive way of talking about things, these sorts of concerns fall by the wayside at times of crisis. What's the panel's thoughts on the value of mentoring at these times of crisis, and how companies should perhaps go about making sure they continue? Holly, are you able to give your view on that?
Yes, of course. I think at times like this, mentoring is as important, if not more important, than during kind of business as usual periods. I think it's very easy, particularly for more informal arrangements, to fall by the wayside because of people get very kind of bogged down in trying to kind of just get on with their day. We're all trying to adapt to a new working norm, and we're not able to necessarily continue with sort of the way that these relationships would have been had you been in the office, whether that be grabbing a cup of coffee with somebody, having a sort of quick kitchen chat and just being able to organically maintain those relationships. But I think it is really important that people are setting the time aside with individuals who they view as a mentor to them, to make sure that they're still having those conversations that are still important. I think it's very easy with mentor and mentee relationships to not realize until there's a problem that the relationship has kind of fallen apart a little bit. And I think actually being able to maintain those conversations throughout a time like this is as important for when those issues do arise.
Thanks, Holly. Michelle, I think we can have another go at talking to you. I wonder if your views on mentoring in a time of crisis, and perhaps you might also address what you were, I think, trying to say about Wilmot-Dixon schemes.
Yes, on the sort of time of crisis, I think mentoring can be more important than ever at a time where some of the more structured training sessions may be disappearing. I think mentoring can be a really good to continue people's development, whilst other things may get pulled back a little bit if we're uncertain of what's happening in the future. But also, mentoring isn't just about that professional relationship. You do develop personal relationships with your mentees, and they may need that assurance and support in a different way as we go forward. It can be more difficult because, as you say, the other presenters have said, those informal coffee chats are a lot harder to do, but it does mean just touching base with someone every couple of weeks to see how things are going can ensure that you maintain those relationships. I think that is really key. The other issue, I think the question I was trying to answer before was looking at the sort of process that Wilmot-Dixon have. There's a mix across the business, but one of the things we're looking at doing at the moment is that Future Female Leaders programme, which is simple things like introducing some of our more junior teams to female leaders across the business. Not all of our boards yet have female directors, so ensuring that there's relationships and networks created across the wider business to get people exposed to different people and different circumstances is really helpful.
Thank you, Michelle. I mean, one of the benefits I've seen since we've all been working from home is the ability to have meetings much more easily. You don't have to find a meeting room, for example, in the office anymore, which always used to be a problem for us. So perhaps there are some benefits to this crisis in terms of communicating effectively with others. Barbara, I don't think we've heard from you on this question of how to make sure that mentoring continues effectively during the crisis. Or am I confused? Have we heard from you?
No, you haven't heard from me yet, and I agree with what the other speakers have said, that it is important to continue mentoring during this time, and that, you know, if you think one of the core skills of a mentor is to listen, actively listen, obviously to observe body language and the unwritten language of people is one thing, but actually through listening on the phone or through a video call can be as effective as face-to-face meetings. So, for example, I've been working with the Chartered Institute of Personal Development over the last year on a Steps Ahead mentoring scheme supporting women who are looking to return to work after a period of being unemployed or looking after family, and that's worked really effectively. That's always been a virtual mentoring session. And actually, I think during the time of this pandemic, you know, we all still want to think that we're going to have a prosperous career. Some of us, we've got 30 years left, some have got less than 30 years left. And I think there is an issue. If you do want to develop your career and you see members of your team, or perhaps you are on job retention scheme, you see your HR team working full out, trying to sort out, you know, the new way of working, and everything's quite intense, you almost feel like, oh, should I be developing my career at this stage? Should I just not be happy that I'm in a job? And I think that's where mentoring is really important, for somebody to come in, whether it's somebody within your own organisation or outside your organisation, to encourage you to have those career goals and work through. And, you know, men at this time, you know, we can do, and our business is encouraging people to do training. So when you're on the job retention scheme, or furlough, as it's called in the media, you can do training. So I think this is a great time to get a mentor to actually help you focus on what should you be training what should you be prioritizing, so that you don't just act like a headless chicken and click on any training button, any webinar button, but work with somebody to explore what is your long-term goal and what are your options and how are you going to work through that, and take this opportunity to learn. Thank you.
Thanks. And Dana, what's your view on how mentoring can help, or how it may have struggled in this time of crisis? What's your view?
I think mentoring can be a huge help, and I'd like to focus on an area of this that hasn't necessarily been talked about yet. As we are all, or as many of us as possible, are remote working, I think many companies, many organisations are reflecting on whether that might be part of their sort of future strategy, that will be more remote working, there will be more flexible working. And it seems to be mentoring, whether it's one-to-one or circle or group mentoring, could offer a great way of building and maintaining culture, knowledge exchange, those sorts of issues, while we're dealing with the fact that we're not always in the same physical space. But I think there's a huge amount that we can take from mentoring to apply and think about strategies for increasing flexible working and increasing remote working where it's appropriate.
Dana, you use some terms there that not everyone will be familiar with, things like circle mentoring. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yes, absolutely. So traditionally, mentoring is often seen as what we might remember from the Karate Kid movie, where you have someone more experienced teaching someone who is very inexperienced at the start of their career. But there are other forms. It doesn't necessarily have to be one-to-one. Circle mentoring is where you actually have a group of people who may be at a similar stage in their careers or in their lives, and they're working with a mentor who's kind of facilitating the group, so not necessarily the one-to-one. And then there are other forms such as peer mentoring, so they're not necessarily a difference in age or a difference in experience. So just to highlight that there are different forms that have kind of arisen over time.
That's really helpful. Thanks very much. We're going to turn to some questions from our audience now. There's a very interesting question here. How can we ensure that mentoring programs, and I guess we're talking about more formal programs in this sense, are accessible and prioritized across the wider business to allow, for example, women returning from maternity leave to get the maximum benefit from these kinds of schemes? I'm going to take a risk here and say, would anybody on the panel like to volunteer to tackle that question? How can we make sure that the mentoring schemes are available and prioritized for those women returning from maternity leave, for example? Anyone want to go for that one?
Okay, I'll have a go. Just politeness was holding me back. I think women returning to work and people returning to work from a period of absence for whatever reason, in our business, we provide them with a buddy, and we have a mentoring exchange program that is open to everybody. And part of the briefing back into the business would be, don't forget, there's the mentoring exchange platform which you can go and seek people out on, and we can do you a match. But really, I think that's quite an alien way to encourage people to connect within the business. So what we do is when somebody comes back from a period of leave, extended leave, then the team, they would have a buddy within that team that would be linked in with their HR business partner. So it's a bit more of a structured system that connects people in, and it's not just to tell them what's the new IT system like and what's happened to the timesheets. It is a buddy stroke mentor, and then we just have the mentoring exchange beyond that.
Michelle, is that something that you specifically tackle at your organisation, about how to make sure that access is provided to returners and perhaps people on reduced hours and things like that?
Yeah, we do operate a return to work programme to encourage people who've been off on maternity leave or taken a career break back in, and there is a formal process for those people to ensure that they're not just sort of dropped in, they are able to settle in quickly, and part of that is probably more informal mentoring program. I think that the problem sometimes with people working part-time hours is they feel that they have to get a lot of work done in that part-time hour, and it's really showing that as a business we value the time that we spend mentoring people just as much as getting the tasks done. And that may be an area where sometimes people feel uncomfortable taking that time out for their own development. But I think, yeah, we absolutely need to encourage those people to have those conversations with us, to start those processes off and make sure that we give that time, regardless of how many hours a week that person is available to work.
Sure. I don't know, Dana or Holly, if either of you would like to weigh in on that, or we can go on to the next question.
Nothing to add from me. I think kind of as a company, we operate similar schemes around kind of the back to work program and trying to sort out those partnerships for people. I think one thing I would just say is I think it's about making sure that there is a balance of it sitting with the mentee to kind of go out and find somebody, but that's easier said than done often. And I think, yeah, when there's a company there to act as almost, or your company is able to act as a sort of partnership pairing to partner you with sort of a willing mentor internally, then that's really useful.
Okay, well, I think we'll move on to the next question now. This is one of an interesting question. Would you recommend looking more broadly for mentors across perhaps other related companies in your industry, or is it best to try and find a mentor within your own company? What's the best approach? Dana, do you have a view on that?
I do. I think it's a really interesting one. As an organisation, we get queries about both styles, and I think it's really about the outcomes that you're looking for as an organisation. So for some organisations, if they're thinking about succession planning, if they're thinking about nurturing future talent, they may well go for a more of an in-house style where the leadership team or principals are mentoring people who are perhaps identified as someone who they could develop or someone who's interested in developing themselves into future leaders. But increasingly we're being asked about the opportunity to match people from other organisations. We've always done that as the norm for our mentoring programs. We see huge value. We're we're probably overusing the word, but an incredibly diverse industry in terms of the styles of business, in terms of the scales of business and the agendas of business. So it's always so interesting for us when we're matching people from different disciplines, different companies, different ways of operating, because you learn so much. If you're someone in a sort of huge, maybe international entity working with someone in a kind of micro business, 10 people or less, it's a completely different view of the industry, but you learn so much alongside of the issues around diversity and inclusion, so much about the different styles of business too, and we think that's incredibly important.
And I suppose also it's about trying to find people with the right credentials. I mean, I don't know how people should, what priorities people should be putting in terms of looking for the right mentor. Whether it's looking for someone who's had a similar career path to the one you want, or is it more about personal issues? What do you think, Dana?
Yeah, we allow the mentees to kind of lead us in the direction, if you like, on that issue for themselves. So everybody who applies is asked that question, and we get some intriguing answers. So sometimes people very much want someone who they think is almost like a role model to them. I want someone whose pathway that I can see, that's the one that I want to follow. But we also get people saying, I want someone completely opposite from me. I want to learn about a completely different perspective, educational background, everything. Because I think that will be most useful in terms of maybe better understanding myself, but also seeing a completely different perspective. So we use the information that we gather about mentees and mentors to make a match on that basis. So yes, it can be career, it can be lived experience as well. And It can also be background. So we kind of look at all three elements when we're matching.
Would any of the other panelists like to comment on either of those questions about the qualities that people should look for in a mentor, or whether people should be looking more broadly, or whether there's an advantage to trying to find a mentor within your own organisation? Would anybody like to step in?
Yeah, I will.
Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle. You can't see me. Yeah, if I look at my own experience, when I have approached someone to provide mentoring for me, it's often because there is a behaviour or a skill set that I'm witnessing that I know I have a shortage in my own experience. So if I look back to a couple of years ago when I joined the board, whilst competent at talking about my area, the board etiquette and how that all works was a little bit daunting. So I had an agreement with my MD where after each meeting we would just do a short catch up over a cup of coffee and have a chat about how I come across, where I think I could improve, areas that, you know, just because I felt that it wasn't something I was comfortable with, and that just helped build my confidence. So whilst he's my MD, it was just a particular behaviour or skill set that I thought he could really help me with. And that sometimes can be just all you need. A mentor doesn't have to cover every aspect of your development.
Barbara, what's your perspective on this question of looking for a mentor perhaps outside your organisation? How do you deal with questions like confidentiality? Are you able to have an open and frank conversation with somebody from another organisation in the same way you could within your own organisation? What other issues should we be worried about?
No, I think absolutely you can. And just to address, you know, should you be looking for a mentor internally or externally? I think for some people, finding a mentor externally is extremely difficult unless you're on a leadership program or a talent program where the business is offering you a formal external mentoring relationship, which is what we've done within Arcadis. And I recommend to people who do aspire to or are interested in having an external mentor but aren't connected into those formal systems is to use your industry bodies. So, for example, Women Engineering Society offer a mentoring system for their members, and you can act as a mentor or a mentee, and I'm sure there are others around there. In terms of the confidentiality, I think it's the formality of a system will include a code of conduct, governance around what you can and can't do. One of the times I mentored, and it was really rewarding but extremely difficult, and there was lots of issues around confidentiality, was it was a time before construction, and there was a time before I worked in construction, and it was supporting young homeless people in central London. And you know, we couldn't meet in a closed environment. We always had to meet outside. The training was so intensive, and I've been on lots of coaching and mentoring training courses, but that one, which was absolutely about ensuring the safeguarding of those individuals, was paramount. But I think, you know, if you think about what mentoring is, it is about respecting other people's perspectives, and you're contacting a mentor or a mentee because you want to understand about somebody else and learn. And I think, you know, that respect is absolutely fundamental to any mentoring relationship. And we have talked a lot about women, but I think one of the things I wanted to mention is that men are absolute fantastic mentors, and perhaps not all men, but then also perhaps not all women. But in our organisation, where we're 30% women at the minute, we can't afford to have all our women leaders being the only effective mentors within the business. It's absolutely essential that men are, and you know, I think men can really inspire other men when people see the positive impact that mentoring has on both individuals. Thank you.
Thanks. Holly, do you have any thoughts you'd like to add on this question about perhaps cross-border as a way to describe it, cross-border mentoring?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think, as the others have touched on, it is often harder to get an external mentor, just given kind of the nature of the relationships you may have internally are often going to be stronger. I think that there is a lot to be said for having an external mentor around the fact that you can see what other companies are like. You can talk to them about sort of this sort of the norm, and kind of if the way the situations that you're in are the norm, or if there is sort of something within your company that actually maybe not quite be right. So I think it is really useful if you can find an external mentor. I think, as the others have touched on, often this is best to kind of to go about this is probably looking at sort of the external mentoring boards, or kind of your own company might have a process in place that you don't actually know about, and I think that's quite a good, especially sort of lower down within a company. I think the first step is to say internally, does anybody know of any partnerships that we have as a company, and then from there you can then look more externally.
Thanks, Holly. Now, we started a little bit late, so I've let things run on. We are getting close to the end of our allotted time now. I'd just like to go around the panel and ask very briefly for hopefully a succinct comment on any sort of tip that you would like to leave the audience with, or any kind of observation that you'd like to make as a result of today's discussion. I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical order. So, Michelle, you get the short straw. Is there something you would like to share as a parting thought with our audience?
Yeah, I don't think we've really touched on the benefits of being a mentor. I have watched with great pride the development of the people I've worked with across the years, and that stays with me for a long time. I've also got great relationships with people who mentored me 25 years ago, who I would still call now if I've got a query that I think they may be able to help with. And I think that whilst it can seem to be time consuming, especially with a formal process and forms to fill in, the benefits are just totally outweigh the time you put into it.
I would totally agree. In the relationships I've had of this nature, it often makes you question your own assumptions in a way that makes you learn yourself as well. So, Holly, what would you like to?
I think that the one thing that I just want to kind of leave people with is, at this time, I think whether you're a mentor or a mentee, if you have those existing partnerships, pick up the phone. I think if you've not heard from somebody in 8 weeks, given kind of the way we're all working, I think it's really important to maintain those relationships through this time. And as I say, whether that be kind of a mentor or a mentee, I think that we need to keep these conversations going in this more difficult time, and not sort of business as usual.
Thanks. Dana, would you like to offer your parting thoughts?
Absolutely. I think sometimes mentoring can be seen as something as a nice to have, and I'd really like to dismiss that myth. It's been around for about 3,000 years as a strategy, coming from the Greek myths, and there is a reason for that. It's incredibly successful and impactful. And in terms of the construction sector, having been an apprentice at the very beginning of my career, it kind of reminds me of that. It's almost a kind of step back in time, where you had someone who was very focused on your development as an individual, as a professional, and I don't think it's something that should just be about the start of your career. Increasingly, we've had people who are mid-career, or even in terms of their leadership level, they're about to sort of step into the higher echelons of leadership. And mentoring is important at each and every stage. So definitely not a nice to have. I think it's something that is essential.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Thank you. And Barbara, your final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I would say take the step. If you are a mentor, reflect on how well you are mentoring in this period, like Holly mentioned. If you are seeking a mentor, take the step. You might not be necessarily the best connected person in the business, but you've got a line manager. There'll be somebody in the people team who'll be interested in your thoughts. And as soon as you start articulating what it is you want and you desire, then somebody will be able to support you. And realize that if you're in a mentoring relationship and you're not getting a lot from it, consider that maybe it's time to stop that relationship, because not all mentoring relationships work out. But I won't end on that. But yes, take the step and start the conversation.
Thank you. Some very sage advice there. I guess some advice to shop around if you don't find that your mentor is giving you what you need. Well, thank you very much to our panel, to Barbara, Dana, Holly and Michelle, for sharing their thoughts today, that's sharing their insights and wisdom. I certainly found it a very interesting discussion. It's the minutes have flown by. It only remains for me to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors, Wilmot Dixon, Imtech, NASC Trad and Vinci Construction. Our next webinar in the Inspiring Women programme is scheduled for the 8th of July, and we'll be looking at the value of diversity of thought. So please do register for that via inspiring.constructionnews.co.uk. A big thank you to all of you for watching. I hope you found today's webinar useful. From all of us here today, goodbye and stay safe. Thank you.